Well, first, congratulations on Prom Dates. It's a lot of fun. I enjoyed it a great deal, and I want to go to you first, DJ, and I'd like to ask you what the catalyst was for this particular story.
Yeah, it's the first feature that I've ever written, and so I wanted to, as the old adage says, write what I know. And I'm very lucky to have lots of wonderful, long-standing friendships in my life, particularly my two childhood best friends that I've known since the fifth grade. And actually, the summer that I wrote the movie was during the pandemic. That previous summer, I had lost my dad, and it was my friends who were there who were like supporting me through that. Not to be so grim, obviously, the movie is so silly, but it was a reaction to that. It was, oh, if I'm gonna spend a lot of time and energy teaching myself how to do this thing, who and what should I be focusing on? And it became so clear, like, I'm so lucky to have shining examples of friendship in my life, and I want to write a movie dedicated to that.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you. And Kim, would you talk a little bit about directing this film that really does put these friendships, uh, especially between these young women, first and foremost?
Yeah, sure. I mean, getting off of what DJ said, we talked a lot in the beginning just about how important our friends are to us. And we've talked also about just the depths that your friendships can that they can have. It can a lot of times be just even more impactful or even more devastating at times than a romantic relationship. Your friend, the writer dies, the chosen family. So that was something I was definitely interested in wanting to do, but also it was just such a funny script too, and I loved these characters and who they could be and the arcs that they could do. It was just a really fun, funny movie that we did, but that also has like emotional underpinnings. So it felt like really satisfying to work on and direct.
Yeah, wonderful. Oh, thank you. And DJ, would you talk a little bit about, such a the the pinnacle of high school is prom, but would you talk a bit about demystifying that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, quite frankly, when I was trying to decide, the how to couch this friendship story and going through my own high school experiences, I can't say for me when prom happened, I was like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with prom.
Mhm.
But I do remember the feeling of going into a dance in grade 9 or grade 10, being like, if I straighten my bangs the exact right way, maybe everyone's gonna see I'm the coolest girl in school. And
Right.
that's the feeling that this movie is written around. That
Yes.
feeling that you get as a teenage girl when you're not like the hottest girl in school, or you're not the most loved, or you don't, it's that point in your life where you transition from being a kid to being like, I want to be desirable, I want people to see me as important, I want, external validation becomes incredibly important. However untrue that actually is, it feels that way. It feels paramount. And for that reason, you do and say ridiculous things. So that's the feeling that it felt really important to do, really, really important to um, explore and explain. And then in regards to prom, I wanted to give a little bit of the perspective I have now as an adult of just like, it feels like such this huge thing. And then once you get there, you're like, oh, it's the people who make this experience. It's not the event itself. It's fun to take pictures and have a nice dress. Of course it is. And still, what's the fun of taking a picture by yourself? You want to take pictures with your friends. It's memories that you're making. And that requires the people.
Right. Right. Wonderful. Well, thank you. And Kim, would you talk a little bit about, I think we're getting to see queer characters in these kind of more fun, maybe gross out films a little bit. I'm thinking of Bottoms and maybe parts of Booksmart and uh Driveway Dolls. So I think this is really something fresh and fun for queer characters to see themselves in this way. Would you talk a little bit about directing that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I absolutely agree. We love those comps, by the way. Like we're fans of all of those films. So that's great to be in that company. I actually feel like, DJ spoke to that a little bit earlier in terms of like directing also, our other one of our leads, plays a queer lead, but our other lead also is diverse. And I really wanted to also kind of showcase, as we're talking about now, right? Also, just it's it's queer characters are having like a great exploration right now, but I also feel like that's true also for many diverse characters. And one thing that really resonated with me was this whole thing that was kind of like centered around this idea of prom, like in addition to those things, but wanting to feel like you belong. And growing up as somebody who grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, that was something I really keenly felt and really like probably chased a lot too, even though I didn't realize it at the time. So to be able to take and center these types of stories and also surround them with the friendship and love that can be there, it was really satisfying for myself as a director, but also just good as a human. I felt good doing the film, and DJ and I had a great time doing it.
I love that. Thank you. And then DJ, would you talk a bit about there has been a pushback in recent years, I think, among LGBTQ plus viewers about coming out stories. But there is a coming out in this film. And the bottom line is, no matter how much people are like, oh, no, no, no. I mean, it's not your average coming out story either. But everyone still has to come out. No matter what, we still have to come out all the time. And so I think there's a lot of validity to keeping a story like that in. And would you talk a little bit about that from your perspective?
Absolutely. I mean, I hear that criticism loud and clear, and I think it's really important. I think the reason why people buck against coming out narratives being the primary queer stories, queer or trans stories we're seeing, is because it revolves around being palatable to cis and straight people, you know? It's an experience that they understand. It's an experience of like, oh, this queer person, it's in the context of their existence, you know? If everybody was queer, you wouldn't have to come out. So I totally get that, which is why, when I knew I was going to have an element of that in this script, have a character go on a coming out journey, I kind of wanted to get the coming out part done
Yeah.
quickly. I mean, the truth is, when you're queer or trans, you're coming out constantly throughout your life. Every time you have to tell someone your pronouns, every time have somebody of a gender you don't date hit on you, like you have to come out again and again. So I wanted to have the actual just saying of like, I'm gay to the friends, like for Hannah to come out as a lesbian specifically to her best friend to be an element, because I was very lucky to have a lot of support in my life. So I wanted that to be reflected. And then I wanted Hannah's arc after that to reflect the experiences within the first like couple of years of coming out as queer. Like you're like kissing a girl for the first time, you're going on a date with a girl for the first time, like all of those things to come rapidly after. So I could kind of like backdoor sneak it in almost. And then of course we stick the landing with her coming out publicly, which is not something people really do. Like people are out in their private lives for a long time before they come out publicly. So yeah, I wanted to relay a queer coming out / queer experience storyline that was more accurate to my experience than just like, an after school special that's like, how am I gonna tell my mom? Which is very real for lots of people, don't get me wrong. And it can turn into kind of, pardon the lewd phrase, but like struggle porn, which is not always helpful for us.
Right. Yeah, we don't always need that.
Yes.
Before I go back to Kim, I have to ask you, because I imagine you wrote these, but tell me about the Rachel Weisz jokes, because of course that was such a huge thing between Disobedience and The Favorite, and everyone was like, step on my neck. And
Yes. Oh my God. Well, I feel like so many friends of mine that are either lesbians or who are bi have that experience with Rachel Weisz and Brendan Fraser in the Mummy movies, and then with Antonio Banderas and Carla Gugino, or I'm saying her last name wrong, I think, but in Spy Kids, like just these like unbelievably sexy adult women where you're like, what's happening to me when you're watching, that end up being, later in life you look back and you're like, oh, that was a root, that was definitely a queer reference point for me. So I had to include her. Obviously Sarah Paulson is referenced in the script, another iconic, beautiful lesbian. It was really important. I think also something I think I purposely did in the film is I wanted to use the word lesbian and showcase lesbians quite a bit
Yeah.
because that's a term that for some reason people at times tend to avoid. It's different age groups, but they're like, oh no, I'll say that I'm queer, I'll say that I'm gay. I'm like, there is no shame in being a dyke, baby, and
Yeah.
let's say that loud and proud, you know?
Yeah, it's fascinating because I just was writing a piece about that. A lot of it's because it's an uncool term, and then
Mm.
also associations with TERFs. So there's a lot of
Oh my
kind of
God. Absolutely.
yeah,
Well, it's interesting,
yeah,
not to totally go off the rails, but I could talk about this forever. You know, I'm a non-binary lesbian, and
mhm,
there is absolutely like most lesbians I know were gender bending before half of the turfs were even
yeah,
on this planet. So I feel
right,
like it's also discourse gets muddied. There are people who just straight up hate trans people, and it's like, okay, whatever. And then there are people who are like trying to be over thoughtful, and they're like, well, there can't be he him lesbians, you know, that's transphobic. It's like, no babe, like read Stone Butch Blues, it has been happening.
right.